The sound of breaking glass cut through the saloon like a gunshot, and in that moment, Violet Lawson's entire life hung by a thread. Colorado City, 1876. The territory had just become a state, but for Violet, freedom felt like a cruel joke. She stared at the shards scattered across the floor, her hands already trembling before her boss even opened his mouth. "You stupid girl!" Howard Wilkins roared, his face turning that dangerous shade of purple that meant trouble. "Third glass this week!" Violet knelt down fast, gathering the broken pieces with shaking fingers. The whole saloon had gone dead quiet. Every man watching, every eye judging. She could feel their thoughts crawling over her skin like spiders. Daughter of the town drunk, Eastern schoolgirl with fancy ideas. A waste. "I'll pay for it from my wages," she whispered, trying to keep her voice steady. Wilkins laughed, that ugly bark of a laugh that made her stomach turn. "Your wages? Girl, at this rate you'll owe me money by week's end." That's when the saloon door swung open. A tall stranger stepped through, dust clinging to his long coat, spurs jingling softly. Nobody paid him much attention at first. They were too busy watching Violet's humiliation like it was dinner theater. But something inside Violet snapped. She rose to her feet, blood trickling between her fingers from the glass cuts she barely felt. "They call me a waste," she said, her voice suddenly carrying through the entire room. "That's what you're all thinking, isn't it?" The stranger paused at the bar. Wilkins shifted uncomfortably. "Now, I didn't say—" "I've heard it since the day I came back," Violet continued, tears threatening but not falling. "Violet Lawson, the promising girl who went east to study and came back to nothing." Then the stranger spoke. "Whiskey," he said, his voice like distant thunder. "And another glass for the lady." He lifted his head, revealing weathered features and startling blue eyes that locked onto Violet's. "She's just broken one," Wilkins protested. "And she's not a customer. She works here. Or did, until about 30 seconds ago." The stranger placed a silver dollar on the counter, more money than Violet made in a week. "Then consider this her severance pay." Everything stopped. Violet stood frozen, blood dripping onto the floor, humiliation and anger warring inside her chest. "I don't need your charity, Cowboy." The man didn't even blink. "It's not charity. It's a proposition." The saloon erupted in whispers. Violet's eyes flashed dangerously. "I'm not that kind of woman." A hint of a smile touched his lips. "I'm looking for someone to help with accounts at my ranch. Word is, you're educated. Can you cipher?" Yes," Violet stammered, thrown completely off balance. "I studied mathematics." "Then I'll spend every day proving them wrong," he said simply, nodding toward Wilkins and the murmuring crowd. "Those who call you a waste. The position pays $3 a week with room and board. My name is Daniel Xavier. My ranch is 10 miles north." The Xavier Ranch. Everyone knew the name. Everyone had heard the rumors, that he'd been a Union officer, that he'd killed men in Kansas, that he was running from something dark in his past. But nobody knew for certain. Violet searched his face for the trap, the trick, the inevitable disappointment that always came. "Why would you offer me work? You don't know me." "I know enough," Daniel replied, accepting his whiskey. "I know this town is quick to judge and slow to forgive. I know what it's like to be measured by another man's actions." His eyes flickered to her bleeding hand. "And I know talent when I see it. Do you accept?" What choice did she have? Her father's debts had consumed everything. No other establishment would hire her now. "I accept," she said finally. "But I don't need your pity, Mr. Xavier." Daniel downed his whiskey in one swallow. "Good, because I don't offer it. Get your things and tend to that hand. I'll wait outside." "You're making a mistake, Xavier," Wilkins called after him. That girl's nothing but trouble. Daniel paused at the door, turning just enough for his profile to catch the late afternoon light. The only mistake, he said quietly, would be judging her by your small-minded standards rather than her own merit. Then he was gone. Violet exhaled slowly, unclenching her fist to reveal the bloody shards. Maybe this would end in disaster like everything else. But for the first time in months, she felt something other than despair. Not quite hope. She'd learned better than to hope. But it was something close to determination. The wagon ride passed mostly in silence, the November landscape rolling by in browns and golds. Daniel pointed out landmarks occasionally, but didn't press for conversation. He seemed to understand that Violet needed quiet. "Your hand," he said finally as the sun began to set. "We should stop and tend to it properly." Violet looked at the blood-stained handkerchief. "It's fine. I'm sure you have," he replied, surprising her. "But infection doesn't care about your resilience. There's a creek ahead." His tone left no room for argument. At the creek, Daniel retrieved a medical kit and knelt before her. "This will sting," he warned, producing a flask and pouring whiskey over her cuts. Violet hissed but didn't pull away. "You're wasting good whiskey." "It's not waste if it serves a purpose," Daniel said, carefully removing glass fragments. "Much like people." She studied him as he worked, the precision of his movements, the slight furrow between his brows. His hands were strong but gentle, calloused from labor, yet capable of delicate care. "Why did you really offer me this position?" she asked suddenly. Daniel looked up, meeting her gaze directly. "I need someone who can read, write, and calculate. Someone intelligent enough to learn quickly and desperate enough not to leave at the first difficulty." He returned to bandaging her hand. "And perhaps I know something about being judged unfairly. What do they say about you?" A ghost of a smile. "Many things. None of them the complete truth. That I'm running from the law. That I killed men in the war and couldn't stop. That I have a secret fortune, or a secret wife, or both." He tied off the bandage neatly. "The truth is mine to tell when I choose, as yours is yours." When they crested the hill and the Xavier Ranch spread before them, Violet's breath caught. The modest but well-maintained buildings, the sturdy main house, the fenced pastures with cattle grazing in the distance. "It's not much," Daniel said, misreading her silence. "No," Violet searched for the right word. "It looks like a home." Something softened in Daniel's expression before his usual reserve returned. "You'll stay in the small cabin behind the main house. You'll take your meals with me and Mrs. Holloway, my housekeeper." As they approached, a plump figure emerged onto the porch, lantern held high. "You're late, Mr. Xavier," the woman called. Then she spotted Violet. "Well, now, who's this?" "Mrs. Holloway, this is Miss Violet Lawson. She'll be keeping the ranch accounts." Mrs. Holloway's eyebrows shot up. "Lawson, Horace Lawson's girl." Violet stiffened, waiting for the judgment. But Mrs. Holloway surprised her. "Well, thank the Lord. This place needs a woman's touch and someone with proper schooling. Mr. Xavier's idea of bookkeeping is shoving receipts into a cigar box." "I can hear you, Mrs. Holloway," Daniel called, though there was amusement in his voice. "Good," she called back. "Maybe you'll listen this time." Later, alone in her new cabin, Violet sank into a chair as the day's events caught up to her. She'd lost her job, been publicly humiliated, and somehow ended up miles from town with a stranger. It could be the beginning of something better, or it could be another terrible mistake. But as she rose to wash her face, Violet made a silent promise. Whatever this opportunity was, she wouldn't waste it. She would prove her worth, to Daniel Xavier, to Colorado City, and most importantly, to herself. The first week passed in a blur. Violet threw herself into organizing the chaotic state of the ranch accounts. By week's end, she'd established a filing system, reconciled 3 months of transactions, and discovered something shocking. "You've been undercharging the Millerson operation for grazing rights," she informed Daniel one evening. "By my calculations, they owe you nearly $300. Daniel looked up from the neat columns, genuine surprise in his expression. "That can't be right." "It is." Violet pointed to her calculations. "You agreed to charge based on acreage used. When they expanded their herd last spring, nobody adjusted the fee. They're grazing 40% more cattle for the same price." He studied the numbers, then shook his head with what looked like admiration. "I'll be damned. You're right." "I also found discrepancies in the supply orders," Violet continued. "We're paying too much for feed. I've drafted a letter to negotiate better terms." Daniel leaned back, regarding her thoughtfully. "You've done more in a week than I expected in a month." "I told you I wasn't a waste," she said, the words slipping out. "You did," he agreed, his blue eyes holding hers a moment longer than necessary. "And you're proving it every day." Life settled into a rhythm. Violet worked from the small office. Daniel spent days with his ranch hands. Mrs. Holloway visited 3 times weekly, bringing town news and obvious delight in watching Daniel and Violet's relationship evolve. They took meals together, conversations growing more comfortable with each passing day. "You never speak of your time back east," Daniel observed one November evening as they sat by the fireplace. "You never speak of your time before Colorado," Violet countered. A smile touched his lips. "Fair enough." He swirled his whiskey. "Would it surprise you to learn I was once a professor?" Violet's eyebrows rose. "Of what?" "Mathematics, at a small college in Pennsylvania before the war." She studied him with new interest. "What happened?" Daniel's gaze fixed on the flames. "The war happened. I enlisted in '61, served 4 years. By the time it ended, I couldn't imagine returning to lecture halls." He took a sip. "So I came west instead." "To become someone else," Violet said softly. "Someone who didn't see dead men every time he closed his eyes." The raw honesty hung between them, intimate and unexpected. "I went to the Rutherford Academy for Women," Violet said after a moment. "In Massachusetts. Studied mathematics and literature for 3 years on scholarship. I was supposed to become a teacher. What changed? My mother's illness, my father's decline. The money ran out." Violet closed her book. "By the time I got word she was dying, it was too late. I arrived home the day after her funeral. I'm sorry." "Everyone was," Violet replied with bitterness. "Sorry enough to bring casseroles, but not sorry enough to help when father drank away what little we had. Not sorry enough to offer me decent work." "Until now," Daniel said. "Until you." Violet met his gaze. "Why did you really hire me, Daniel? The truth this time." He set his glass down. "Because I recognized something in you that day at the saloon. Pride, yes. Intelligence. But also a kind of contained fury, the same kind I carried west after the war." His eyes never left hers. "And because I believe people deserve second chances, even when the first chance wasn't their fault to lose." Something shifted between them in that moment. A recognition. An understanding that went beyond employer and employee. Violet felt it like a physical thing, this new awareness of Daniel Xavier. Not just as the man who'd given her a chance, but as a man who carried his own ghosts, his own carefully guarded heart. The clock chimed 9, breaking the spell. Violet rose abruptly. "I should retire. There's correspondence to finish tomorrow." "Of course." Daniel stood, maintaining respectful distance. "Good night, Miss Lawson." "Violet," she said impulsively. "I think you might call me Violet." A real smile transformed his face. "Good night, Violet." "Good night, Daniel." She hurried from the room, heart beating faster than standing should warrant. When December's first heavy snow arrived, it blanketed the ranch in pristine white. With trips to town limited by weather, their small community became more self-contained. Daniel and Violet fell into evening discussions that ranged far beyond ranch business. They debated literature. He preferred historical accounts. She favored poetry. They argued mathematics, revealing a playful side to them both. Gradually, cautiously, they shared more of their histories. She learned he'd grown up in Philadelphia, son of a successful merchant, that he'd been briefly married before the war to a woman who died of typhoid while he was at the front, that he'd come west to escape memories and find a place where a man was judged by his actions rather than his past. He learned her mother had encouraged her education against her father's wishes, that she'd once dreamed of opening a school for girls in the West, that she still wrote poetry in a journal hidden beneath her mattress. What neither acknowledged was the growing attraction between them, the way their hands sometimes brushed when passing documents, the lingering glances across the dinner table, the way conversation flowed with increasing ease and intimacy. It was Mrs. Holloway who first gave voice to what others had observed. "He looks at you differently, you know," she said, one bitter December morning as they prepared stew. Violet nearly dropped her potato. "I don't know what you mean." Mrs. Holloway snorted. "Of course you do. I've worked for Mr. Xavier for 3 years. I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you when he thinks nobody's watching." "Mrs. Holloway, really? It's not like that. He's my employer." "And I'm the Queen of England," the older woman retorted. "I've been around long enough to recognize when two people are dancing around what's plain as day to everyone else." She paused, fixing Violet with a penetrating gaze. "He's a good man, Violet. One of the best, and Lord knows he's been alone too long." Violet focused on her potato. "Even if there were feelings, it would be inappropriate. I work for him. I live on his property." "Details," Mrs. Holloway dismissed. "Those can be sorted if there's will to do so." "It's more complicated." "Oh, child, we all have baggage. The trick is finding someone willing to help carry it." The kitchen door swung open as Daniel entered, stamping snow from his boots. "Storm's getting worse," he announced. "McKenna and Phillips are bringing the herd down. We might be snowed in for days." Mrs. Holloway's eyes twinkled. "Then I should head to town before—" "Too late," Daniel interrupted. "Creek Bridge is already drifted over. You'll have to stay." The housekeeper shot Violet a look that could only be described as triumphant. "Well then, seems we'll have a cozy few days." That evening, with the wind howling and snow piling against windows, the ranch hands were invited into the main house. After supper, someone produced a fiddle. Rodriguez revealed hidden talent for lively tunes. Furniture was pushed back and dancing ensued. "Your turn, boss," McKenna called after a spirited reel. "Miss Lawson hasn't had a proper dance yet." All eyes turned toward Violet and Daniel. "I wouldn't want to presume," Daniel said carefully, though his eyes held a question as they met Violet's. "It's just a dance," Mrs. Holloway declared, fanning herself. "For goodness sake, it's practically Christmas. A little merriment won't hurt." Rodriguez struck up a slower tune. Daniel rose and crossed to Violet, extending his hand. "Miss Lawson, would you do me the honor?" Violet hesitated only a moment before placing her hand in his. "It would be my pleasure, Mr. Xavier." His hand was warm around hers as he led her to the center of the room. When he placed his other hand at her waist, Violet became acutely aware of how long it had been since she'd been this close to a man, and never one who affected her this way. They moved together with surprising ease, as if they'd danced 100 times before. The audience faded. Only the music remained, the warmth of the fire. Daniel's blue eyes locked with hers. "You dance well," he murmured. "So do you. Another skill from your previous life." A smile touched his lips. "Some things a man doesn't forget, no matter how far he travels from who he was." Violet wondered if he was speaking of more than dancing. "And who are you now, Daniel Xavier?" His hand tightened almost imperceptibly at her waist. "I'm still discovering that, but I know who I want to be." "And who is that?" The music slowed. "A better man than I was. A man worthy of a second chance." His gaze intensified. "A man worthy of someone like you." Violet's breath caught. Before she could respond, the music ended. Their audience applauded, shattering the moment. Daniel released her with proper decorum, stepping back and bowing as if they'd shared nothing significant. But they both knew better. That night, lying on a narrow cot in the upstairs storage room, Violet found sleep elusive. The storm rattled windows and moaned through eaves, but it was Daniel's words that echoed most persistently. "A man worthy of someone like you." What did he see when he looked at her? Not the failure the town perceived, not the burden her father considered her. But what exactly? And more troublingly, what did she want him to see? Violet turned restlessly. She had come to this ranch desperate for work, for a chance to prove herself. She hadn't come looking for whatever this was developing between them. Attachment was dangerous. She'd learned that lesson painfully with her father, watching him sink into drink despite her every effort to save him. Caring too deeply meant risking devastation when inevitable disappointment came. And yet, she couldn't deny the way her heart lifted when Daniel entered a room, the ease she felt in his company, the growing certainty that he saw her, truly saw her, in a way nobody else ever had. Outside, the storm continued its assault. Inside, Violet's conflicting emotions battled just as fiercely. She finally drifted into uneasy sleep with no resolution, only the knowledge that something had shifted irrevocably between them. And sooner or later, she'd have to decide whether to embrace that change or retreat from it. Morning arrived with blinding brightness, sunlight reflecting off fresh snow. The storm had passed, leaving behind a transformed landscape of white drifts and crystal-clear blue sky. When Violet came downstairs, Mrs. Holloway greeted her with knowing eyes. "He's out checking livestock. Been up since before dawn." The day passed in activity as everyone worked to restore order. Fences needed checking. Animals required feed. Drifts had to be cleared. It was late afternoon when Daniel found Violet in the barn, checking on a newborn calf. "She seems to be doing well," he observed. "Yes," Violet agreed, rising and brushing straw from her skirts. "She's nursing properly now." Daniel leaned against a post, studying her. "You've become quite the rancher in these weeks." "Hardly, but I'm learning." "Is it?" he asked. "More satisfying than teaching mathematics to young women in the East?" The question caught her off guard. That was a different life, a different plan. "Plans can change," Daniel said quietly. "Sometimes for the better, even when we don't recognize it at first." Something in his tone made Violet look at him more closely. There was an intensity to his gaze that both thrilled and unsettled her. "Daniel," she began. "I'm riding into town tomorrow," he interrupted. "The road should be clear. I need to check mail, place supply orders." He paused. "Would you like to accompany me?" The invitation surprised her. "I don't know if that's wise." "Because of what people might say?" "Partly," Violet admitted. "My reputation there isn't exactly stellar. And if I don't care about that—" "You should," she said softly. "Reputations matter in places like Colorado City." Daniel stepped closer. "My business is my ranch, and my ranch is thriving in no small part thanks to you." He reached out, hesitating briefly before tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. The gesture was so unexpected, so tender that Violet couldn't breathe. "I've been thinking," Daniel continued, his hand dropping, "about what you said when I hired you, about being called a waste. I promised to spend every day proving them wrong. I'd like to know if I've succeeded." The vulnerability in his question touched something deep within her. "Yes," she whispered. "More than a little." Relief passed across his features. "Good. About town tomorrow." "I'll go," Violet said suddenly, surprising herself. "You're right. It's time I stopped hiding." Daniel's smile was like sunrise after a long night. "We'll leave after breakfast." The ride to Colorado City was both longer and shorter than Violet remembered. Longer because anticipation stretched each mile. Shorter because Daniel's company made the journey pleasant. As town buildings came into view, Violet's stomach tightened. She hadn't returned since the day Daniel hired her, and facing the town's judgment again filled her with dread. "We don't have to do this if you're not ready," Daniel said, sensing her discomfort. Violet straightened her shoulders. "No, I can't hide forever." They started at the general store. The town was quiet, but Violet still felt eyes on her as Daniel helped her dismount. She recognized Mrs. Peterson and her daughter across the street, heads bent in obvious gossip. "Ignore them," Daniel murmured, his hand supportive at her elbow. Mr. Johnson looked up from his ledger as they entered, surprise registering at seeing Violet. "Miss Lawson, didn't expect to see you back in town." "I've been working at the Xavier Ranch these past weeks," Violet replied with forced confidence. Johnson's eyes darted between them, clearly making assumptions. "I see. What can I help you with?" Daniel handed over their list. "We need supplies, and Miss Lawson has some personal items to purchase." As Johnson moved away, Daniel touched Violet's arm. "I need to check something at the blacksmith's. Will you be all right here?" Violet nodded, though the thought made her nervous. "Of course." After he left, she wandered through the store, selecting what she needed. She was examining ribbons when a voice behind her made her blood run cold. "Well, well, if it isn't my darling daughter, finally deigning to return." Violet turned slowly. Horace Lawson had once been handsome, but years of hard drinking had left him gaunt and prematurely aged. Disheveled clothes, bloodshot eyes, the sour smell of whiskey even at this early hour. "Hello, Father," she said quietly, conscious of watching customers. Horace swayed slightly. "Don't father me, girl. Where have you been? Ran off without a word, leaving your flesh and blood to fend for himself." "I left a note," Violet replied, fighting to keep her voice steady. "And I've sent money twice." He waved dismissively. "Pennies. Not enough to keep a man in basic necessities." "You mean whiskey," she said, unable to keep the bitterness from her tone. Horace's face darkened. "Watch your tongue. I'm still your father." He stepped closer, alcohol fumes heavy on his breath. "Word is you're living at the Xavier place. Playing house with that fancy rancher, are you?" Heat rushed to Violet's face. "I'm employed there as an accountant. Respectable work." Horace barked a laugh. "Respectable, she says. That's rich coming from a girl who abandoned her father to shack up with—" "That's enough, Lawson." Daniel's voice cut through the store like a whip. He stood in the doorway, expression harder than Violet had ever seen. Horace turned unsteadily. "Xavier, is it? The man who's taken my daughter?" "I haven't taken anyone," Daniel replied, voice controlled but edged with steel. "Miss Lawson is my employee, and you're causing her distress." "She's my daughter," Horace insisted, voice rising. "I have rights." "Not to harass her in public." Daniel moved to Violet's side. Are you all right?" Violet nodded, though she felt anything but. This was exactly what she'd feared. Her father's drunken accusations confirming the town's worst suspicions. "We're leaving," Daniel told Horace firmly. "Mr. Johnson will deliver our supplies. Miss Lawson, shall we?" He offered his arm. "You can't take her," Horace protested, lurching forward to grab Violet's other arm. "She has responsibilities. Debts." "Let go of me," Violet said, trying to pull away. "Your debts are your own, Lawson," Daniel said coldly. "Whatever you've squandered is on your head, not hers." Horace's grip tightened painfully. "You high and mighty bastard. You think you can just—" What happened next occurred so quickly Violet barely registered it. One moment, Horace was gripping her arm and threatening Daniel. The next, he was sprawled on the floor, looking up in shock as Daniel stood over him, fists clenched. "Don't ever put your hands on her again," Daniel said, his voice deadly quiet. "Not if you value what's left of your miserable life." The store had gone completely silent. "You'll regret this, Xavier," Horace spat, struggling to his feet. "Nobody lays hands on Horace Lawson without consequences." Daniel's expression didn't change. "I look forward to your attempt. Now get out before I decide you need another lesson in manners." For a tense moment, Violet thought her father might actually fight, but self-preservation won. Horace stumbled toward the door, pausing only to point an unsteady finger at his daughter. "You're no daughter of mine," he declared loudly. "Siding with him against your own blood. Your mother would be ashamed." The words struck like physical blows. Violet swayed, and Daniel's arm immediately went around her waist. "Your mother," he said with quiet intensity, "would be proud of the woman you've become. Now get out, Lawson, before you embarrass yourself further." Horace glared, then staggered out, muttering curses. Daniel turned to Violet, expression softening. "Are you hurt? Did he injure your arm?" Violet shook her head, though her arm did throb. "I'm fine, just mortified." She glanced at the staring customers. "Everyone saw. They'll talk." "Let them," Daniel said firmly. "You've done nothing wrong." They left quickly, Daniel helping Violet onto her horse with gentle efficiency. As they rode from town, more people had gathered, drawn by commotion. Daniel ignored them all. They were almost to the edge of town when a voice called out, "Miss Lawson, wait!" Sheriff Burns jogged toward them, badge glinting. Daniel tensed, but the lawman's expression held no hostility. "Miss Lawson," Burns said, slightly out of breath, "there's something you should know about your father." Violet steeled herself. "What has he done?" "It's not what he's done. It's what's happening to him." Burns removed his hat. "Doc Williams examined him last week. Your father's sick, Miss Lawson. Liver's failing. Doc doesn't give him more than a few months." The news hit Violet like a physical blow. Despite everything, the neglect, the cruelty, the abandonment, Horace Lawson was still her father, the only family she had left. "I see," she said finally, voice surprisingly steady. "Thank you for telling me, Sheriff." Burns nodded solemnly. "I thought you should know. Whatever's between you two, well, time has a way of running out when we least expect it." They rode in silence for nearly a mile before Daniel spoke. "What are you thinking?" Violet kept her eyes on the road. "I'm thinking my father made his choices long ago, and I've made mine." "Violet, he's dying," she said tonelessly. "We're all dying, some just more efficiently than others." Daniel reined his horse to a stop, forcing Violet to halt. "Look at me." Reluctantly, she turned. "When my wife died," he said quietly, "I was at the front. I never got to say goodbye. Never got to tell her all the things I should have said." His gaze held hers steadily. "I wouldn't wish that regret on anyone." Tears filled Violet's eyes. "What am I supposed to do?" Forgive him for drinking away our home, for blaming me for Mother's death, for every cruel word. No, Daniel said. Forgiveness is your choice, but facing him, saying whatever you need to say while there's still time, that's different. A tear slipped down her cheek. I don't know if I'm strong enough. Daniel reached across to take her hand. You're the strongest person I know, Violet Lawson, and whatever you decide, you won't face it alone. Not anymore. The simple promise, not to fix things for her, not to tell her what to do, but simply to stand beside her, broke something open inside Violet. Tears came freely now. Daniel said nothing more, just held her hand as she wept, a steady anchor in the storm. When at last her tears subsided, Violet took a shuddering breath. I need time to think, to decide. Take all the time you need, Daniel replied, releasing her hand with gentle reluctance. The choice is yours. The days that followed were filled with quiet routine. Mrs. Holloway returned with exaggerated tales of Daniel's defense of Violet's honor, which had apparently grown with each telling until it involved drawn pistols and threats of duels. Ridiculous, Daniel muttered. I merely prevented a drunk from harassing his daughter. Well, the town sees it differently, Mrs. Holloway declared with satisfaction. Half the women are swooning over your gallantry, and the other half are reconsidering their opinion of Miss Lawson. Violet looked up in surprise. Reconsidering how? Mrs. Holloway patted her hand. Let's just say, seeing Horace at his worst while you maintained dignity has shifted some perspectives, and Mr. Xavier's obvious concern hasn't gone unnoticed. After Mrs. Holloway left, Violet found herself restless, unable to settle. She wandered to the sitting room, where Daniel worked at his desk by lamplight. He looked up at her entrance. Can't sleep. She shook her head. Too many thoughts. I know something about that. He gestured to the chair across from him. Would company help? Company, she admitted, taking the seat. They sat in comfortable silence for several minutes before Daniel spoke. I've been thinking about what Burns told us, about your father. Violet tensed. So have I, she sighed. I don't know what to do. Part of me wants to ignore it, to let him die as he lived, alone and bitter. But another part remembers the father he once was. Before the drink took hold, Daniel finished gently. Yes. Violet's voice caught. Before Mother died, he used to lift me onto his shoulders so I could see over crowds, taught me to ride, read to me every night. Daniel's expression was quiet understanding. Those memories are real too, Violet, just as real as the pain that came after. But they don't erase what he became. No, Daniel agreed. Nothing erases that. The question is whether you can find peace with whatever decision you make now. Violet studied his face in the lamplight. What would you do? Daniel considered carefully. I would remember that we rarely regret the kindnesses we extend, even to those who may not deserve them. But we often regret the kindnesses withheld when the chance is gone. His words settled into Violet's heart. I'm afraid, she confessed. Afraid that if I see him again, if I try to help him, it'll just be one more disappointment. That's valid, Daniel acknowledged. But consider this. You're not the same woman who left Colorado City 3 months ago. You're stronger now, more sure of yourself. Whatever happens with your father, it can't diminish who you've become. Violet felt tears threaten. And who is that exactly? Daniel's gaze was steady. A remarkable woman, intelligent, resilient, compassionate despite having every reason not to be. He paused. A woman I've grown to care for deeply. The confession hung in the air, simple yet profound. Violet's heart raced as they crossed into new territory, where feelings long unspoken were finally acknowledged. Daniel, she began, uncertain. You don't need to say anything, he assured her quickly. This isn't the time, with everything you're facing. I wanted you to know, whatever you decide about your father, about your future here or elsewhere, you should know that you matter to me. Impulsively, Violet leaned across the desk and pressed her lips to his cheek. A brief, gentle touch that conveyed what words could not. Thank you, she murmured, drawing back. Daniel's expression was surprise and something deeper. For a moment, Violet thought he might pull her back, might turn the chaste gesture into something more. But he simply nodded, releasing her hands reluctantly. Whatever you decide about your father, he said, I'm here. I know. And she did know, with a certainty that felt like solid ground after months of shifting sand. I think I need to see him. One last time. Daniel nodded. When? Tomorrow, Violet decided, surprising herself. Before I lose my courage. I'll take you, Daniel offered. Violet shook her head. No, this is something I need to do alone. She saw concern flash across his face. But perhaps you could accompany me to town. Wait for me while I speak with him. Of course, Daniel agreed, relief evident. Whatever you need. Dawn broke clear and cold as Violet and Daniel prepared for their journey. They rode mostly in silence, each lost in thought, though occasionally Daniel would point out a hawk or deer track, small observations that grounded Violet in the present. As they approached town, Violet's apprehension grew. Maybe this is a mistake, she said, pulling her horse to a stop. Daniel halted beside her. Do you want to turn back? She took a deep breath. No, I need to do this. She looked at him. But what do I say after everything? The words that will bring you peace, Violet. That's all that matters. Whatever you need to say, in anger, in sorrow, in forgiveness, if that's where your heart leads, say it for yourself, not for him. His wisdom steadied her. You'll wait? As long as it takes, he promised. I'll be at the hotel restaurant. They rode into town, attracting less attention than before. Daniel helped Violet dismount at the boarding house where her father had taken a room. Thank you, she said, straightening her skirts nervously. For believing I can do this. That's the easiest thing I've ever done, Violet Lawson. With his quiet confidence bolstering her courage, Violet entered the boarding house. Mrs. Carlton looked up from her ledger. Miss Lawson, this is unexpected. Hello, Mrs. Carlton. I'm here to see my father. The older woman's expression turned sympathetic. He's had a rough night, dear. Been coughing something awful. Doc Williams was here at dawn. Concern pierced Violet's armor. Is it worse? Hard to say with your father. The drinking doesn't help. She gestured toward the stairs. He's in room 4. Can't promise he'll be sensible. Thank you for the warning. Violet climbed the narrow staircase, each step feeling heavier than the last. Outside room 4, she paused, hand raised to knock. What would she find? The bitter man from the general store? The broken shell of the father she once adored? Or something in between? A man lost to grief, but perhaps, in his final days, capable of something like reconciliation. There was only one way to find out. She knocked firmly. Harsh coughing answered before a raspy voice called, Who is it? It's Violet, Father. May I come in? Silence. Then, it's not locked. Violet turned the knob and entered a room that assaulted her senses. Sickness, unwashed linens, stale whiskey. Her father lay propped against pillows, a shadow of the man he'd once been. Yellowish skin, sunken eyes, trembling hands. Come to gloat? He asked, though the words lacked venom. No, Violet replied, closing the door. I came because Sheriff Burns told me you're ill. Horace gave a wheezing laugh that turned into coughing. Dying, you mean? No use prettying it up. Violet moved to the chair beside the bed. Is there anything you need? Anything I can do? Her father regarded her with bloodshot eyes. Now you ask? Bit late, wouldn't you say? The accusation stung, but Violet refused to be baited. Perhaps, but I'm asking now. Something shifted in Horace's expression. Surprise, maybe, at her calm response. He looked away, staring at weak winter sunlight filtering through grimy glass. Why'd you really come, Violet? Guilty conscience? No, she said truthfully. I came because despite everything, you're my father, and because I don't want to live with the regret of never having said what needs to be said between us. Horace's gaze returned to her face. And what's that exactly? Violet took a deep breath. That I loved you once. That I mourned not just Mother's death, but yours too. The death of the father you were before the drink took you. His face contorted. Pain or emotion, Violet couldn't tell. Your mother was everything to me. When she died... I lost her too, Violet interrupted, voice steady despite the ache in her chest. I was 19, Father. I needed you, but you weren't there. You chose the bottle over me every time. Horace had no answer, just a slight slumping of shoulders that might have been shame. I'm not here to list your failings, Violet continued. God knows I have my own. I'm here to say that I forgive you, not because you deserve it, but because I deserve peace. Her father's eyes widened. Forgive me, just like that. No, not just like that, Violet corrected. It's taken months. It may take years more to fully mean it. But I'm starting now, while there's still time to say it to your face. Tears appeared in Horace's bloodshot eyes. Violet couldn't remember the last time she'd seen her father cry. Perhaps at her mother's funeral, though even then he'd been more angry than sorrowful. You always were stubborn, he said, voice rough with emotion. Like your mother that way. Silence fell between them. Not comfortable, but not hostile either. Finally, Horace spoke again, softer. That rancher, Xavier, he treating you right? The question surprised Violet. Yes, he's a good man, a fair employer. Horace's gaze sharpened, despite his weakness. Just an employer, is he? He paused. The way he looked at you in the store, ready to kill me for grabbing your arm. That's not how an employer looks at an employee. Violet felt heat rise to her cheeks. Your mother would like him, I think, Horace continued, a distant look in his eyes. She always said you needed someone who could match your spirit, not try to break it. Father! Horace reached out suddenly, his trembling hand grasping hers with surprising strength. I was wrong yesterday. Your mother wouldn't be ashamed of you. She'd be proud. So damn proud. His voice broke. She always was, you know, even when I wasn't. The admission, the apology embedded within it, struck Violet speechless. After all the years of blame and bitterness, this moment of clarity from her dying father was almost more than she could comprehend. Thank you for saying that, she managed finally. Horace released her hand, exhaustion evident in every line of his face. I don't have much time. Doc says weeks, maybe days. He struggled with his next words. I don't expect you to care for me. I haven't earned that. But I'd like not to die a complete stranger to my only child. It was as close to a plea as Horace Lawson had ever come. Violet found herself nodding before she'd fully considered what she was agreeing to. I'll visit again, she promised, and I'll speak with Doc Williams about your care. Relief washed over her father's gaunt features. You always were a better person than me, Violet. Better than I deserved. Perhaps we both deserved better than what life gave us, Violet replied softly. But we still have this time. Let's not waste it with more regrets. When Violet finally left her father's room an hour later, she felt both emotionally drained and strangely lightened. Nothing had been fully resolved. Too much damage for one conversation to heal. But a beginning had been made. A door opened that had long been shut. She found Daniel waiting in the hotel restaurant, nursing coffee as he reviewed papers. He looked up the moment she entered, rising with concern evident. "How was it?" he asked as she approached. Violet sank into the chair opposite him. "Difficult. Necessary. Better than I feared. Not as good as I might have hoped." Daniel signaled the waitress. "Tea for the lady, please, and some of that apple cake." Violet smiled weakly. "How did you know I needed something sweet?" "You're pale as a ghost," he replied simply. "Sugar helps after emotional trials. At least that's what my mother always claimed." As the tea and cake arrived, Violet gradually related the conversation, her father's unexpected vulnerability, his partial apology, his request that she visit again. "What will you do?" Daniel asked when she'd finished. Violet sipped her tea. "Visit him again, I suppose. Perhaps speak with Doc Williams about making him more comfortable." She set her cup down. "He mentioned you, actually." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Oh? He said my mother would have liked you." Violet felt color rising. "He also implied that your interest in me might be more than professional." Daniel was quiet, watching her carefully. "Would that disturb you if he were right?" The directness took her breath away. No, no, it wouldn't disturb me." Something like hope flickered in Daniel's eyes. "Good, because your father, despite his many failings, is an observant man." Before Violet could respond to this remarkable statement, the hotel doors burst open. Sheriff Burns rushed in, expression grave. "Xavier," he called, spotting them. "Need your help. Fire at the Peterson place. Their barn. Every able-bodied man is needed." Daniel was on his feet instantly. "Of course. Miss Lawson, will you be—" "I'm coming too," Violet declared, standing. "Mrs. Peterson has young children. Someone needs to see to them while the men fight the fire." Daniel looked like he might protest, but the determined set of Violet's jaw convinced him otherwise. "Very well. Let's go." The scene at the Peterson farm was controlled chaos. Flames leaped from the barn, threatening to spread to the nearby house. A line of men passed buckets of water with grim efficiency. Women gathered children and valuables, preparing to evacuate. Daniel immediately joined the bucket brigade. Violet sought out Mrs. Peterson, finding her clutching her youngest child, the other three huddled nearby with fear-tight faces. "Mrs. Peterson," Violet approached. "Let me help you get the children somewhere safe." The harried woman looked up, recognition and relief washing over her features. "Miss Lawson, thank God. Timothy won't stop crying, and Sarah keeps trying to run back for her doll." "I've got them," Violet assured her, kneeling to address the children. "Hello there. I'm Miss Lawson. Your mama needs help keeping you safe while the men stop the fire. Can you be brave and come with me to that big oak tree? We'll be able to see everything, but we'll be out of the way." The children, responding to her calm authority, nodded solemnly. From their vantage beneath the oak, they watched the battle against flames. Violet kept the children distracted with stories and games, all while keeping one eye on the fire. And, she had to admit, on Daniel, who worked tirelessly alongside men who'd likely gossiped about him for years. "He's quite something, isn't he?" Mrs. Peterson remarked, following Violet's gaze. Violet flushed. "He's a good man." "Yes," Mrs. Peterson agreed thoughtfully. "I'm beginning to see that. And perhaps I've been unfair in my assessment of you as well, Miss Lawson." The unexpected acknowledgement caught Violet off guard. "You hardly know me." "I know you came immediately to help my children when you could have stayed safely in town," Mrs. Peterson pointed out. "And I know that Mr. Xavier values you highly, which says something about your character." She bounced the fussing toddler. "The town has been hard on you since your return, perhaps unfairly so." "Perhaps," Violet agreed cautiously. Mrs. Peterson smiled suddenly. "Elizabeth Burns speaks highly of you, says you have uncommon intelligence and dignity. High praise from Elizabeth." Before Violet could respond, a cheer went up from the men. The flames appeared to be retreating. The worst danger had passed. "Thank God," Mrs. Peterson breathed. "John put everything we had into that barn." "It looks like they saved the structure at least," Violet observed, watching as men continued dousing smoldering sections. Eventually, exhausted firefighters began to disperse, faces and clothes blackened with soot. Daniel made his way toward the oak tree, expression lighting with relief when he spotted Violet safe with the Peterson family. "The fire's contained," he reported, voice rough from smoke. "North wall and roof are badly damaged, but the foundation is sound. It can be rebuilt." "Thank you," Mrs. Peterson said fervently. Mr. Peterson approached then, face streaked with soot and sweat. "Xavier, I owe you my thanks. You and your men worked like demons." "Happy to help, Peterson." Daniel extended his hand, which the other man clasped firmly. A simple gesture that nonetheless symbolized something significant. Acceptance, respect, community. As they prepared to leave, Mrs. Peterson caught Violet's arm. "Miss Lawson, the children and I would be pleased if you would join us for Sunday dinner sometime soon. Perhaps you and Mr. Xavier both." The invitation, so ordinary yet so meaningful in its social recognition, touched Violet deeply. "We'd be honored, Mrs. Peterson. Thank you." The ride back to the ranch was quiet, both lost in thoughts about the day's events. It wasn't until they'd seen to the horses and were walking toward the main house that Daniel finally broke the silence. "You were remarkable today," he said, "with the Peterson children, and before that with your father." Violet glanced at him, noting the admiration in his gaze, despite his disheveled, smoke-stained appearance. "I only did what needed doing." "That's precisely what makes it remarkable." He stopped walking, turning to face her fully. "Violet, Whatever he'd been about to say was interrupted by Rodriguez, who came hurrying from the bunkhouse. "Boss, telegram came while you were gone. Courier brought it special from town." Daniel frowned, accepting the envelope. "Thank you, Rodriguez." The hand retreated, and Daniel quickly scanned the message, expression growing serious. "Bad news?" Violet asked. "Potentially," he admitted, folding the telegram. "Cattle buyers from Kansas City arriving next week. Earlier than expected. We'll need everything in order. Accounts, stock numbers, grazing projections." "We will," Violet assured him. "I'll start first thing tomorrow." Daniel studied her face. "You've had an exhausting day. Your father, the fire. It can wait." "I'm stronger than I look," Violet reminded him with a small smile. "Besides, I want to help. This sale is important for the ranch." "For us," Daniel corrected quietly. "It's important for us." The simple correction, the inclusion of her in the ranch's future, made Violet's heart skip. "Then we'll be ready," she promised. The week that followed was a blur of activity. Accounts were meticulously updated. Best stock was moved to pastures closer to the house for easy viewing. Even the main house received extra attention, with Mrs. Holloway declaring that important business required proper setting. Through it all, Violet made time to visit her father every other day. The conversations were sometimes difficult, occasionally heartbreaking, but increasingly honest. Horace Lawson was fading quickly, his liver failing more rapidly than even Doc Williams had predicted. But in his lucid moments, father and daughter began the slow, painful work of reconciliation. "He asked about you today," Violet told Daniel as they sat in his office late one evening, reviewing final figures. "My father, I mean. He wanted to know if you were courting me properly yet. Violet felt her cheeks warm. His words, not mine. Daniel set down his pen, expression suddenly serious. And what did you tell him? That our relationship was complicated. Violet fidgeted with the edge of a paper. That we were colleagues and friends, but that recent events had perhaps suggested the possibility of more. The possibility, Daniel repeated, voice carefully neutral. Is that how you see it? Violet gathered her courage, meeting his gaze directly. How do you see it, Daniel? He rose from his chair, moving around the desk until he stood before her. I see a woman who walked into my life when I'd stopped expecting anything to change it. A woman of extraordinary intelligence, courage, and grace. His voice softened. A woman I've fallen in love with, though I've been hesitant to say so given the circumstances of our meeting. The declaration, though not entirely unexpected after their growing closeness, still took Violet's breath away. Daniel, you don't need to respond, he said quickly. I know this is sudden, and with your father's condition and the buyers coming. Violet stood, closing the small distance between them. It's not sudden, she interrupted gently. Not really. Not when every day since we met has been leading to this moment. Hope blazed in Daniel's eyes. Violet, are you saying... I'm saying that I love you too, she whispered. That you saw value in me when I couldn't see it in myself. That you've spent every day since we met proving wrong anyone who ever called me a waste, including me. Daniel's hands came up to frame her face with exquisite tenderness. You were never a waste, Violet Lawson. You were always a treasure waiting to be recognized for your true worth. When he lowered his lips to hers, Violet met him halfway. A kiss that felt like coming home. Gentle at first, then deepening with the passion of feelings, long restrained, but finally, gloriously, acknowledged. What happens now? Violet asked softly when they finally parted. Daniel's thumb traced the curve of her cheek. Now we face whatever comes next together. The cattle buyers, your father's illness, the town's gossip, all of it. But first, he stepped back slightly, still holding her hands. I'd like to court you properly, if you'll allow it. No matter what your father or anyone else thinks, you deserve to be honored, cherished, and respected, not just as someone I love, but as the remarkable woman you are in your own right. Tears of joy sprang to Violet's eyes. I would like that very much. Their newfound understanding brought a different quality to their work in the days that followed. A sweet awareness of each other, small touches, and private smiles, even as they maintained professional decorum. Though Mrs. Holloway's knowing looks suggested their changed relationship hadn't escaped her notice. The cattle buyers arrived on a clear, cold morning in early January. 3 men from Kansas City, led by a shrewd businessman named Harrison James. They spent the day inspecting stock, reviewing figures, and negotiating prices. Violet participated fully in discussions, her command of the ranch's finances impressing the initially skeptical buyers. Your wife has quite a head for business, Xavier, James remarked during a pause in negotiations. Miss Lawson is our accountant, Daniel corrected smoothly, though his eyes met Violet's with warmth. And yes, her expertise is invaluable. By day's end, a deal had been struck that exceeded even Daniel's hopes, a contract for 200 head with promise of future business. We did it, Violet breathed as the buyer's wagon disappeared down the road. You did it, Daniel countered, pulling her into his arms now that they were alone. Your organization, your projections, your negotiations on the final figure. This success belongs to you, Violet. Before she could demur, a rider appeared on the horizon, approaching at a gallop. As the figure drew closer, Violet recognized the sheriff's deputy. Miss Lawson, the young man called, reining in sharply. Doc Williams sent me. It's your father, ma'am. He's taken a bad turn. Doc says He says you should come quick if you want to say goodbye." Violet felt the world tilt. Daniel's strong arm around her waist was the only thing keeping her upright. Despite the complications, despite the hurt and anger that still lingered, the news hit her with unexpected force. "I'll saddle the horses," Daniel said immediately. "We can be in town within the hour." The ride to Colorado City passed in a blur, Violet's mind racing with all the things still unsaid, all the conversations they'd never have now. Daniel rode beside her, solid and supportive, occasionally reaching across to touch her arm reassuringly. When they reached the boarding house, Doc Williams was waiting on the porch, his aged face grave. "He's still with us," the doctor informed Violet. "But fading fast. The hemorrhaging has started internally. There's nothing more I can do except keep him comfortable." "Thank you, doctor," Violet managed. "May I see him now?" "Of course. He's been asking for you." Doc Williams glanced at Daniel. "Perhaps Mr. Xavier would like to wait downstairs." "I want him with me," Violet said firmly. "If that's acceptable to you, Daniel." "Whatever you need," he replied simply. Horace Lawson lay still and pale, his breathing labored, his skin waxy with approaching death. But his eyes, once bloodshot and clouded, were surprisingly clear as they fixed on his daughter's face. "You came," he whispered as Violet sat beside him. "Of course I came," she replied, taking his frail hand. Horace's gaze shifted to Daniel, standing respectfully near the door. "Xavier, take care of her." "I intend to, sir," Daniel answered solemnly. "Though she's quite capable of taking care of herself." A ghost of a smile touched Horace's lips. "Ain't that the truth? Always was the strong one, my Violet." His focus returned to his daughter. "I want you to know, your mother would be so proud of the woman you've become, of the life you're making." Tears slipped down Violet's cheeks. "I wish she could have seen it. I wish you both could see what comes next." "I see enough," Horace replied, voice growing fainter. "I see you found a good man, a man who values you proper." His grip tightened briefly. "I'm sorry, Violet, for all of it, for not being the father you deserved." "I know," Violet said softly. "I forgive you, Father, and I hope you found some peace." Horace's eyes closed briefly, then opened again with visible effort. "More than I expected. Enough to go easier." His gaze sought Daniel again. "You got a ring for my daughter yet, Xavier?" Daniel moved forward to stand beside Violet. "Not yet, sir, but I have intentions, with her permission." "Good. That's good." Horace's breathing grew more labored. "Violet, the box under the bed, your mother's things, should have given them to you years ago." Violet looked to Daniel, who immediately knelt and retrieved a small wooden box. She recognized it immediately, her mother's keepsake box. "Open it," Horace urged weakly. "The ring. She'd want you to have it." With trembling fingers, Violet lifted the lid to reveal modest treasures: a cameo brooch, a packet of letters tied with faded ribbon, a lock of baby hair, and a simple gold band with a small diamond. "Her engagement ring," Violet whispered. "I thought you'd sold it years ago." Horace shook his head slightly. "Couldn't. Last piece of her I had." His eyes moved between Violet and Daniel. "Should be yours now, for your future." The gesture, unexpected and deeply meaningful, brought fresh tears. "Thank you, Father." Horace's eyelids fluttered, strength clearly fading. "Be happy, Violet. Be loved. That's all I want now." He drifted into unconsciousness after that, breathing growing increasingly shallow. Doc Williams returned to check, confirming what Violet already knew. The end was very near. She sat holding her father's hand as hours passed, Daniel a steady presence beside her. Occasionally she would speak softly to Horace, telling him about the ranch, about her hopes, about memories from childhood she treasured despite everything that came after. As dawn approached, Horace Lawson drew his final breath, passing from the world with his daughter's hand in his and her forgiveness granted, imperfect, still evolving, but real. The funeral was held 2 days later, a simple affair attended by more people than Violet expected. It seemed that in death, Colorado City remembered Horace Lawson as he had once been, a hard-working settler, a skilled horseman, a man who loved his wife deeply, rather than the broken alcoholic he'd become. Daniel stood beside Violet throughout, his quiet strength sustaining her. Mrs. Holloway had prepared a small reception at the ranch, and many from town made the journey. Sheriff and Mrs. Burns, the Petersons, even Mr. Johnson from the general store. "Your father was a good man once," Mrs. Burns told Violet as they stood on the porch, watching the winter sunset paint snow-covered landscape in gold and pink. "And in the end, he found his way back to some measure of that goodness through his love for you." "I hope so," Violet replied. "I'd like to believe that." "He did," Mrs. Burns affirmed. "Everyone could see it." She patted Violet's hand. "And everyone can see that you found happiness here." Her gaze drifted to where Daniel stood talking with the sheriff. "Mr. Xavier is a fortunate man." "I'm the fortunate one," Violet corrected gently. Mrs. Burns smiled. "Then you're fortunate together, which is the best kind of fortune there is." As guests gradually departed and the house grew quiet, Violet found herself drawn to the fireplace, watching dancing flames as she had on so many evenings. The small wooden box containing her mother's possessions sat on the mantel, a connection to her past now integrated into her present. Daniel joined her after seeing the last guests off, standing beside her in companionable silence before speaking. "How are you feeling?" Violet considered the question honestly. "Sad, relieved, grateful." She looked up at him. "At peace, I think, or getting there." He nodded, understanding. "Your father made mistakes, grievous ones, but in the end he recognized the remarkable woman his daughter had become. There's a kind of redemption in that." "Yes," Violet agreed softly. "For both of us." Daniel took her hand, his thumb brushing over her knuckles. "What happens now is up to you, Violet. The ranch accounts are in perfect order. With the cattle contract secured, you could return east to finish your education if you wanted, or stay in Colorado City and open that school you once dreamed of." He paused, blue eyes serious in the firelight. Or, she prompted when he hesitated. Daniel released her hand only to reach into his pocket, producing something that made Violet's breath catch. Her mother's ring. "Or you could stay here with me," he said, voice low and earnest. "Not as my accountant or employee, but as my wife, my partner in all things." He held the ring but didn't yet offer it. "I know it's soon, perhaps too soon after your father's passing. I know there will be talk in town. But I also know that I love you, Violet Lawson, and I don't want to waste another day not telling you so." Violet's eyes filled with tears, not of sorrow this time, but of joy. "It's not too soon," she whispered. "Not when I've known since that day in the saloon that you were the man who would change my life." "Is that a yes?" Daniel asked, hope lighting his features. "Yes," Violet said clearly, confidently. "Yes, I'll stay. Yes, I'll be your wife. Yes to all of it, Daniel." He slid the ring onto her finger, her mother's ring, a connection to her past now becoming a promise for her future. When he kissed her, Violet felt the last pieces of her heart healing, the final shadows of doubt receding. "They called me a waste," she murmured against his lips. "And I spent every day proving them wrong," Daniel finished, drawing back to gaze into her eyes with love and pride. "Though the truth is you proved them wrong yourself. I just had the privilege of witnessing it." Violet's smile was radiant as she wound her arms around his neck. "Then witness this, Daniel Xavier. I love you, and I always will." Their next kiss sealed the promise. Not an ending, but a beginning. Not a conclusion, but a continuation of the journey they'd started that fateful day in a Colorado City saloon, when a cowboy saw value in a woman the town had written off, and a woman found strength she'd forgotten she possessed. Spring came early to Colorado that year. By March, snow had retreated from valleys, leaving behind fresh grass and wildflowers that transformed the landscape from white austerity to vibrant life. At the Xavier Ranch, now officially the Xavier Lawson Ranch by Daniel's insistence, the season brought not just new calves and longer days, but preparations for a wedding. Violet stood on the front porch of what was now truly her home, surveying the changes the past months had wrought. The ranch hands were constructing a new barn. The old one would be converted into a schoolhouse, the first step toward Violet's dream of education for local children, now integrated into their plans for the ranch's future. The main house had been expanded with a new wing. Mrs. Holloway had taken to calling it the nursery wing, with meaningful glances that made Violet blush, though neither she nor Daniel discouraged such speculation. "Penny for your thoughts," Daniel's voice came from behind, his arms slipping around her waist. Violet leaned back against him, savoring the solid warmth. "I was just thinking about how much has changed since that day in the saloon, how completely different my life is now." "Regrets?" he asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "Not one," she replied, turning in his arms. "Though I do sometimes wonder what would have happened if I hadn't dropped that glass." Daniel smiled, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear in the gesture that had become cherished habit. "I'd like to think I would have found my way to you somehow, that some things are simply meant to be regardless of the path taken to reach them." "Such a romantic," Violet teased, though her eyes shone with matching sentiment. "Only with you," he admitted. "Before you, I wasn't sure I was capable of feeling this way again. After Kathleen died, after the war." He shook his head. "But you changed that. You made me want to be the man I used to be before loss hardened me." Violet reached up to touch his face, fingers tracing the strong line of his jaw. "We healed each other, I think." Daniel turned his head to press a kiss to her palm. "And we'll continue to do so every day." The sound of an approaching wagon interrupted their moment. Mrs. Holloway had arrived for her daily duties, accompanied by Mrs. Burns, who'd taken keen interest in wedding preparations. "No time for canoodling on the porch, you two," Mrs. Holloway called as she descended with remarkable spryness. "We have menus to finalize and arrangements to confirm. Only 3 weeks until the big day." Daniel groaned theatrically. "Remind me again why we didn't elope." "Because Mrs. Holloway would have tracked us down and dragged us back by our ears," Violet replied with a laugh. "And because despite everything, it feels right to stand before our community and declare our commitment." "Our community," Daniel repeated thoughtfully. "It is that now, isn't it? Not just a town that judged you or land I purchased to escape my past, but a place where we belong." Violet nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. The past months had seen a gradual but significant shift. The successful cattle contract brought prosperity benefiting local businesses. Violet's plans for a school were met with enthusiasm, and their personal story, from confrontation in the saloon to upcoming wedding, had captured the town's imagination, transforming skepticism into something like collective investment in their happiness. "They'll all be there," Violet said, referring to the wedding. "Even Mr. Wilkins from the saloon sent a note accepting our invitation." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Forgiveness extends that far, does it?" "Not forgiveness exactly," Violet corrected. "More like moving beyond, refusing to let past slights define future possibilities." "A philosophy to live by," Daniel agreed, pressing a kiss to her forehead before releasing her as Mrs. Holloway and Mrs. Burns approached, arms laden with fabric samples and lists. The wedding day dawned clear and perfect. April sky and unblemished blue that seemed created specifically for the occasion. Violet stood in what had once been her cabin, now converted to a guest house, as Mrs. Burns and Mrs. Peterson helped her prepare. Her dress was simple but elegant, ivory silk with delicate lace at collar and cuffs, ordered specially from Denver. Her hair was arranged in a coronet of braids, with sprigs of wildflowers gathered that morning by the Peterson children woven throughout. "You look beautiful, dear," Mrs. Burns declared, stepping back to assess her handiwork. "Absolutely radiant." "It's happiness, not the dress," Mrs. Peterson observed with a smile. "Though the dress certainly doesn't hurt." Violet studied her reflection in the mirror, barely recognizing the confident, glowing woman who looked back. Gone was the desperate, defensive young woman who'd stood in the saloon with broken glass at her feet, replaced by someone who knew her worth, who had found her place in the world. "It's time," Mrs. Burns announced, consulting the small watch pinned to her bodice. "The guests are seated, and Daniel is waiting." The ceremony was to take place in the meadow behind the main house, where a simple archway had been constructed and decorated with early spring flowers. As Violet approached on Sheriff Burns' arm, he'd offered to give her away, an honor that had brought tears when proposed. She saw the gathered community rise to their feet. Ranch hands and townspeople, the banker and the blacksmith, the saloon owner and the minister's wife, all united in witnessing this moment. And at the end of the aisle, standing tall and proud beneath the archway, was Daniel. His face, as he watched her approach, held such love, such wonder, that Violet felt her heart might burst with answering emotion. When she reached him and Sheriff Burns placed her hand in Daniel's, the connection felt like coming home after a long journey. Familiar yet miraculous. Ordinary yet extraordinary. "You are breathtaking," Daniel whispered as the minister began. Their vows were traditional with personal additions, promises not just of love and fidelity, but of partnership, of mutual respect, of continuing to see the best in each other, even when times grew difficult. When Daniel placed the gold band beside her mother's engagement ring, his hands were steady, but his eyes glistened with emotion. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the minister declared to assembled guests. "Mr. Daniel and Mrs. Violet Xavier." Their first kiss as a married couple was met with cheers and applause. The celebration continued well into evening, with music and dancing, food and laughter beneath lanterns strung from trees. "Are you happy, Mrs. Xavier?" Daniel asked as they shared their first dance as husband and wife. "Deliriously," Violet confirmed, eyes never leaving his. "And you, Mr. Xavier?" "More than I ever thought possible." He drew her closer, voice dropping to a whisper meant for her alone. "I once promised to spend every day proving wrong those who called you a waste. Today feels like the culmination of that promise." "Not the culmination," Violet corrected gently. "Just another beginning. We have a lifetime of days ahead to build this ranch, to start our family, to create the school, to be partners in all things." She smiled up at him, heart in her eyes. "Every one of those days will be proof of what we've found together." Daniel's answering smile was all the confirmation she needed. That the promise made in a saloon months ago had evolved into something far greater than either could have imagined. It had become not just the foundation of their love story, but the cornerstone of the life they would build together in this wild, beautiful land they now called home. And as the music played and stars emerged in the vast Colorado sky, Violet and Daniel Xavier danced into their future, surrounded by a community that had witnessed their journey from judgment to acceptance, from brokenness to healing, from two separate stories into one shared narrative of redemption, love, and the courage to begin again. If this story of resilience, redemption, and unexpected love touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Drop a comment below telling me which moment made you believe in second chances. Was it when Daniel first stood up for Violet in the saloon, when she forgave her dying father, or that perfect proposal by the fireplace? Share your thoughts, and I'll see you in the next story. Until then, remember, you're never a waste. You're just waiting for someone to see your true worth.